How do you find funding opportunities? We're going to talk about discovery. There are some pretty typical grant stages in most grants. There's discovery, there's questions and answers with the donors. So if you find an interesting opportunity, you're like, I wonder what they mean by the environment. Wonder what they mean by uh, educational skills. I wonder if they're interested in fact, one of my projects, was with something called we needed to support digital innovation hubs. And so we were sat there thinking, what does this donor mean by digital innovation hubs? And we asked them, and they said, and we said, do makerspaces count? And they wrote back saying, don't know. And because that was their answer, in the funding bid, we made an incredibly strong argument that makerspaces are, in fact, digital innovation hubs. And we introduced them in the bid at the beginning as makerspaces. And then throughout the rest of the funding document, we never said makerspace again. We only ever said hardware DIHs, hardware digital innovation hubs. And it was basically using the donor's language back to them. But if we hadn't had that question and answer opportunity with the donor, we wouldn't have known to do that. So there's a Q&A period as well. Normally, the Q&A period can be quite time limited. There's only certain moments when you can ask these questions. If you're really lucky, there's a concept note stage. If there isn't a concept note stage, it means you're jumping straight into a full application, which means more time, more money, more effort, and you don't know how successful you're going to be. So I've applied for grants where you go straight to a full application. Because the grant is quite broad, it could be funding lots of different things. I found out later on that there were 750 applications for 4 grants. And I was furious. I was like, why would you do that? At least have a concept note stage, have some Q&A, and then you can decide whether you want to apply for it or not. A short list of 4, winners, 4 grants out of a short list of 20 is better than 4 grants out of a long list of 750. How do they even review that many grants? It was bonkers. Anyway, if you're successful, but sometimes even if you're not successful, you will be asked to go through a due diligence stage. And that's where you need to be, if I jump back here, this is where you need to invest in getting your organization ready, because you'll need to go through due diligence at that stage, where they'll look at things like your contracts, your policies, your procedures. Who owns the organization? Who are your board members? Do you have the right skills? If you get through all of that, you go on to contracting. That can take a while, at least it should take a while. In one situation, the contract I received took 1 year to negotiate. The time difference between being told we've been awarded the grant and the money arriving took a year, because the contract was so awful and we weren't going to agree to it. We actually had to help the donor improve their contract. We didn't just sign it. Then you've got implementation. You implement the thing that you're going to do, and then throughout that, you've got reporting. You report fairly regularly. So that's the typical grant stages. I'm only going to talk about discovery in this next section. And my biggest bit of advice here, discovery is networking. It really helps to actually ask people. I was talking about networking. Last night, I went to a gathering of people in a pub in London, where somebody was leaving their job. So it was a goodbye party. And I'm not naming names. And we, this person and I have potentially had a bit of a difficult relationship perhaps over the years, but I went anyway because I think they've done a really good and difficult job. But one of the reasons I went is because I wanted to network, because I knew other people, including government donors and other trusts and foundations and other innovators, were going to be there. So I went and I networked and I spoke to people. And every now and again, I asked them, so have you got any funding coming up? Ask for money. It can be quite hard to do, but there's ways to do it. I don't suppose you'd be interested in funding some work around climate change and makerspaces, would you? Just ask the question and see where it goes. I'm looking for $5,000 to support some people with disabilities who we really want to help to become makers. We've been talking with them for a few months. We'd like to involve them in our makerspace, but they don't have the money to travel and to stay with us. So we're looking for some money to support them, and we need to make sure our trainers. So we need about $5,000 for that. I don't suppose your embassy would have a grant for that, would you? Don't be afraid to ask. Discovery is about networking, and you've got to be able to ask the question of, do you have any money? Be open. So by that, I mean, try to take the time to talk honestly with people, because, one of the things that I have found, and this is not, me being manipulative, I hope, is if I talk to people that I know, or perhaps have recently met, and I'm sort of 3 or 4 minutes into a 10-minute conversation, when I'm networking with them, I'll say, we've got a big problem. We've got this really odd challenge about how we maintain the financial sustainability of this makerspace, because they're doing all of this incredible work, and we have all of these makers, but the challenge is actually the relationship with the university is just draining us, and it's we really need to find a way to solve that problem. By being open like that, people get involved. You draw people to you, and a lot of people will want to try and find ways to help you solve that problem. So being open, not indiscreet, not begging, but talking about, we're doing great stuff, but we've got this challenge. I'm inviting you to help me solve that problem, to overcome that challenge. And maybe we can fundraise together for something, to work on this together. A lot of people like that. It's not the same as being asked, it's an invitation. And fundraising together is also something that I use quite a lot. If I go and meet an interesting organization, I'm like, we'll have to see if we can fundraise together and do some work together. And people respond positively to that. People really will. Discovery is about networking, but let's get practical for a minute. Discovery is also looking up stuff online a lot. So go onto a donor website. The GIZ website, the German government website for South Africa. Steve was showing it to me the other day, showing all of the different projects they're working on, reading about it, trying to work it out, sign up to the email lists, contact the people who are running it, find out what's going on. You might go onto a project website. So perhaps there's a project you've found around circular economy. Sign up to that email list. Have a look at websites like Funds for NGOs. This is where you might have to invest in fundraising. Funds for NGOs is one of the cheaper websites, and they give you little bits for free. But if you pay, I think it's like $100 a year or something, then you get access to their full database, and they are quite global as well. So websites like Fund for NGOs, if you have more money, websites like Grant Station, they might be helpful. There may be equivalents in your countries for these sorts of opportunities. I don't know. You'd have to have a look. But yeah, you might need to spend money to access these databases, online databases of funding opportunities. There are blogs. One of my favorite blogs to find out about funding opportunities is called ICT Works. And actually, donors pay money to send emails to that blog list. There's like 500,000 people on it. And a lot of them are people like me who are looking for funding all the time. So ICT Works is a good blog. Then you're looking at like local or thematic association networks. So in Kenya, there is the, I think it's called the Association of Countrywide Hubs, and the makerspace is a part of it. Maybe they have a WhatsApp group where you can share funding opportunities with each other. There's another group called the Global Innovation Gathering, and there's a WhatsApp group for that. If you're a member of the Global Innovation Gathering, great. If you want to join the Global Innovation Gathering, it's a German association, but it's all over the world, then you need to find a member who will nominate you. I'm a member, and I can have a chat with you and see if I want to nominate you. But also people like Martin Olu from Fab Lab Winam is a member of it. And thematic association networks. So perhaps there is a circular economy Facebook group for Accra, or perhaps there is a TVET conference that happens every year in Lagos. Try and sign up to those sorts of things and keep an eye on them and follow them on social media like Facebook and WhatsApp. But don't just do online. Get out into the world, meet people, visit donors. And sometimes I do this a lot, but it's just like, hey, I'm going to be in Glasgow. I'm visiting your city. And sometimes I'm just making it up. Like I'm not going to be there anyway. I want to visit them. I'm going to be in Nairobi. I've got 3 days. Have you got time to have a meeting? And if they say yes, great. You go to their offices, you have a chat. If they say no, like, oh, don't worry, perhaps we can have a remote meeting, an online meeting at some point. You know, use the idea of a trip or a visit as an opportunity to meet face to face with donors and request one-to-one meetings. When you're in those meetings, don't just ask them about them, ask them about other donors, ask them about other opportunities. Fundraising discovery is networking. Go to thematic conferences. So there is a global conference for Fab Labs. There is perhaps the Kenya Innovation Week for innovators from across the country. Sorry, that should say association conferences. So perhaps there is the Association of Countrywide Hubs, or the Association of TVET colleges. Maybe you can go to their events, actually spend money, take time, go to these things. And honestly, I sometimes go to these conferences and whilst the events are happening, I just sit there and work. I just sit there and do my email. And then when the breaks happen, and when the lunchtime happens or the evening reception happens, I go and network and talk to people. And at these events, I will try to look smart, but I will often wear the logo of my organization. So I would, so people look at it, what's that? Well, I've not heard of that before. Tell me about it. It depends on the event. This is missing some text. I'm not quite sure what's going on. Industry conferences. Perhaps there is a trade show for the engineering sector, or perhaps there is a trade show for the plastics industry or something. Going along to those and just talking. I mean, the people who go there are going there to sell stuff, right? But perhaps you can go there and ask, I don't suppose your company's got a social or charitable giving scheme, has it? Or the people who own your company are interested in funding makerspaces, and you can just have the conversations. That's a really challenging one. That's a harder one to get right because they're not there. They're trying to sell you, and if you turn up and you're the one asking them for money when they're trying to sell stuff, that can be hard. But it still lets you know a little bit about the landscape. Receptions. I know some of you get invited to receptions with donors and events with donors. One of the activities that happened last year because of this project is that some of the makerspaces in Kenya were invited to a reception for the visit of King Charles III of England, who was visiting Kenya. That's a great opportunity to network. Go and chat with the British ambassador. Go and chat with the American ambassador. Ask for a follow-up meeting. Try never to leave a meeting without having a follow-up meeting. And social events like the one I went to last night, a bunch of people from the aid sector. Keeping up appearances is important. Keeping up appearances if you can, and I know it's going to cost money, and I know it's going to be expensive, and I know you're busy. I know you're busy. You've got to make a space to run. But keep turning up to things. Try and find time to turn up to things so that people can build a relationship to you. So if there is a monthly meeting of the Rotary group in your town, go once, perhaps give a talk, but then perhaps in 4 months' time, go again and see if and take someone else with you to see if you can give another talk. Try and keep up appearances. So networking and discovery isn't just online, it's also in person. Let me try and get back control of the PowerPoint. Keep business cards. Never throw away a business card. Always keep business cards. Take photographs of them, save them in your phone, never throw them away. It's amazing how suddenly you'll need a business card 4 years later. Save key contacts in your phone. Sharing WhatsApp details is quite common now, but save the contacts in your phone and label them. Don't just say, Michael Afrifa at the makerspace in Kumasi. Also say in your notes whilst you're at the event, speak to him about joint fundraising in Kumasi from the British Embassy. Save key contacts in your phone, but make notes or email yourself so that you remember to follow up. Use LinkedIn. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile, get one. It's changing now. It's becoming a little bit more social, which is a shame. But it is really a great way to find out who's working where. And you can look up the staff of foundations. So if you want to know who's running the Orange Foundation, the MasterCard Foundation, the Cisco Foundation, if you want to know who runs the local office of the British government, FCDO or GIZ in your country, LinkedIn is your friend. And, if you need an introduction, you can ask somebody that you have as a mutual connection. Record all funding opportunities. Now, this takes time, particularly if you have a lot of them coming at you, but keep track of them all. Don't keep track of them if you're never going to apply to them. Like if this funding opportunity is for sports organizations that want to build football pitches, that may not be something your makerspace is interested in. You don't have the land to do that. So why would you apply for that? But if it is a genuine opportunity, record it. And later in this webinar, I'm going to show you some examples of that. And this is all built up over time. You develop an instinct. You develop an instinct of what kind of donor would be interested in your work. It comes over time, it comes with experience. So just keep practicing it. Once you've discovered an opportunity, dig a little bit deeper. Understand the financial limitations of that opportunity. Is it $100,000? Is it $50,000? Is it $500,000? Is it fully funded, or does it require some match funding? Does it pay in advance? Does it pay in arrears? Does it require you to be registered in the UK or the US or your own country as a charity or as a for-profit, or what are the financial limitations? Keep an eye out on match funding. If it requires match funding, that can be a bit of a headache, but maybe it suits some of your existing funding. The Innovative Manufacturing in Africa project is matched funded by the MAKE project, which is a separate thing that has very similar aims on supporting makerspaces in Europe and Africa. See if there's an opportunity as you dig deeper. See if there's an opportunity for that matched funding, if it needs it, to be delivered in kind. So an example of in-kind match funding might be perhaps some of the trainers who will come and help you would be volunteers. Perhaps you're not going to charge for the use of the space. That's an in-kind contribution. Perhaps you're not going to charge them for the use of the machines. That's an in-kind contribution. Perhaps you get free software licenses from Google for your email account. If you have Google Suite for your email software, that's an in-kind contribution. Because if you weren't a charity, if that wasn't available to you, you'd have to pay for that. But if it's free and your organization's getting it for free, it's an in-kind contribution to your organization, which means it's an in-kind contribution to the project. Add it all up. This training today is coming to you free of charge. It's an in-kind contribution. So if your donor can accept in-kind contributions, you can write a whole load of them in there, as long as you can justify them. Look for any exclusions. Some donors might say, we don't fund staff. We don't fund capital building expenditure. So we won't fund a building. You can't use this to buy land. We won't fund bank fees. We won't fund this is beyond the purpose of the grant. This is more like the detail of the grant. Have a look for the exclusions, see what they are. Check how much time is available before committing to apply to it, and then commit. And organize yourself. Assess and record when the work, assess and record the work required for the bid and by when. So there's a concept note stage, put it in your diary. Block out time in your calendar to do the concept note stage. If you are required to submit a budget, block it out in your diary. Make a note of it on a post-it note on your desk, on your laptop, so you remember. As you organize, divide the work into smaller bits and try and get help with different parts of it. Delegate some of the work. Divide and conquer. Make the task lots of smaller tasks and get organized. Use your calendar, like I've said, and keep track of the ideas that go into it, other opportunities that might arise as you talk with people, and keep track of your progress as well to make sure you don't all leave it to the last minute. Here's an example of an opportunity tracker. So you can do this as post-it notes on a whiteboard. It's essentially, some of you might know the phrase Kanban, which is basically a series of columns, and you can, you move tiles between them. So you can do this on a whiteboard with post-it note, with a pen, or just post-it notes on a wall. But basically, you just need to keep track of the opportunities. These are the ones I'm applying to right now. These are the ones I'm applying to next. I still need to do research into these opportunities. This opportunity is being accepted and it's going to the next stages. just lay it out really simply, one opportunity per post-it note, one opportunity per tile, one opportunity per cell in a spreadsheet, and then you just move them around. So here you can see in column G, whoever owns this tracker is applying to the European Union Green Tech Fund. They are currently applying to the National Science Foundation, and they are currently applying to the Creative Economy Fund. In column B, you can see that they are looking at the EU 2020 grants, the Maker Cities grants, and the National Endowment for the Arts. And they still need to do some discovery on that. But once they found one, it can move along where you're looking into partners, or you can decide I'm not applying for it, you know, column F. But when you commit, put it in column G. When you're submitted, put it in column H. Move them around. You get the idea. Just keep track. One funding opportunity per post-it note, per cell, per row in a spreadsheet. Keep track of them all. I'm going to show you a tracker that I used. Here we go. At my previous organization, Field Ready. So this isn't Kanban style, where it's one post-it note per organization. It's one row per organization. And we'll be sharing all of these templates with you afterwards. So the first thing to see, by the way, I hope this is coming through fast enough, is that there were a lot of them. Every single row on here is one funding opportunity. And there are about 500 rows. We would keep track of everything. Now, we were a big team. The organization had 100 people in it. But every row is a single funding opportunity that we were considering. And if you look into more detail, the first column is priority. It's the top priority. We're doing it right now. And you should only really have one or two of these that you're working on at any one time. In Field Ready's case, they worked all over the world. So it's which country are you in? That tells you who's responsible for it. So if it's in Nepal, Ben is responsible for it. If it's in the Pacific, Luke is responsible for it. Who's leading on the bid? Here's the donor. So it might be Toyota. It might be Qatar Red Crescent. When's the next deadline? Not all the deadlines. When's the next most important deadline? It gives you a sense. And you can see some of these are quite old. Brief description. And here this one says, Samoa is in the grip of a measles epidemic and Field Ready have a foot-operated tap that we can trial. So we're going to use the makerspace to make taps that are operated by foot so that people don't spread measles. The update is we need to get more detail. The status is the funding bid was successful, but it needs a bit more work because there's some follow-on questions. Here's the link. It's a joint bid with other organizations. It was $50,000. You get 10% indirect costs. So that's gonna be a topic of conversation later on. And when does the project start? So we've got all of these columns across the top, and we filled this in reasonably reliably. But this is the way that we did things at Field Ready when we were organizing our work. We also had an ideas repository, which we didn't use very well, but essentially we had one row per idea. So these are things we'd like to fundraise for, to do, that we never actually did.